Chrisean, baby. Sweetheart, sit tight, because the story I am about to unroll on you today is not the same version you have been fed on every timeline for the last 6 months. Trust and know, when I finish laying this out, the way you look at Chrisean Rock is going to shift, the way you look at that whole camp around her is going to shift, and by the time we get to the last piece of paper, you are going to understand why the internet is now saying out loud what the streets have only whispered since February. This is bigger than a rumor. This is bigger than a podcast clip. This is a full-blown reckoning, and Chrisean Rock is standing in the middle of it with her hands empty and her name on fire. Let me set the scene for you, because if you are new to this corner of the culture, you have to understand the weight of what we are dealing with. A man is dead. A young man named Ronnie, who the whole internet came to know as Ronnie Doe, was gunned down outside his own home in Maryland in February of 2025. That case is still open. Prosecutors up in Baltimore are still digging. And every single week, more people are stepping forward with more receipts, more voice notes, more screenshots, more whispered warnings, and every single week the finger pointing gets a little closer to Chrisean Rock and the people orbiting her. This week, that finger did not just point. This week, that finger jabbed. Because Ronnie's own former manager, a woman named Jess West, finally opened her mouth on camera, and what came out of that mouth is the kind of testimony that turns a cold case warm again. So here is where it stands. Ronnie Doe, before he died, was climbing. He was building a platform. He was doing rooms he had never been in before. He sat down with Tasha K, and that interview cracked him open like a piñata. He sat down at tacos and shawarma. He sat down with Elle. He was making music. He was telling his side. He was saying, out loud on every microphone that would carry his voice, that he believed he was the biological father of Chrisean Rock's oldest son, and he was daring anybody in that camp to prove him wrong. And in the middle of that climb, according to Jess West, the phone call started. The threat started. The plane ticket started. Ronnie was allegedly being flown out of Maryland, into Nevada, off the map, because the man was terrified. And when Jess West was asked, on the record, who Ronnie was afraid of, she did not stammer. She did not soften it. She said Ronnie was afraid of exactly one household. Chrisean Rock and her family. Pouring gasoline on a blaze already burning, that is what this interview did. Because for months, people on this platform have been dancing around the word. Podcasters have been dancing around it. YouTubers have been dancing around it. Even the tabloids have been dancing around it. Nobody wanted to be the one to say the thing that everybody was thinking. And now here comes Jess West, sitting across a camera, saying it flat. Chrisean's fans were psycho. Chrisean's family was pressing. The threats were arriving in Ronnie's inbox, in his DMs, in his voicemail, and Jess herself was catching heat from what she called the circus, meaning the loyalists around Chrisean Rock, who allegedly went after her pages, doxed her, and tried to squeeze her out of the conversation entirely. And still, she is talking. Still, Jess is naming names. Still, the story refuses to die. Chrisean, baby, this is where the temperature changes, and this is the part one want you to sit with, because the internet has always been split on Chrisean Rock. There has always been a Chrisean camp that swore she was a queen surviving. There has always been another camp that swore she was a hurricane in human skin. But this new information is not asking you to pick a side on her personality anymore. This new information is asking you to consider whether a man is dead because he refused to shut his mouth about a baby. That is the question. That is the ugly, jagged, unavoidable question that Jess West just planted on the front page of the story. And once a question like that is planted, sweetheart, you cannot unplant it. Anyway, keep up with me, because I need you to understand the calendar. Ronnie's rise was not slow. Ronnie's rise was almost overnight, and it happened for one reason. He did the Tasha K interview, and that interview lit him up like a runway. Overnight, the man went from a name in a comments section to a name in every headline. Overnight, he was doing shows. Overnight, he had a following. Overnight, he was walking into rooms with contracts on the table. And overnight, according to Jess, the death threats started rolling in with the same speed. The bigger Ronnie got, the louder the warnings got. The louder the warnings got, the further Jess had to fly him from his own zip code. She said it plain. There were multiple times where the team had to buy him plane tickets out of Maryland and fly him to Nevada because he was scared for his life. That is not a metaphor. That is a receipt. That is a documented, verifiable, itemizable pattern of a young man running from a shadow he could see coming, and telling the people around him exactly whose shadow it was. And what did Ronnie say when they asked him? Was it the streets? Was it a rival? Was it somebody from his past? Was it business? No. According to Jess West, Ronnie only ever named one source of his fear, and that source was Chrisean Rock and her family. That is the sentence that is now echoing across every platform. That is the sentence that has prosecutors sharpening their pencils. That is the sentence that has Chrisean Rock's PR team, if she has one left, working overtime tonight. Now let me pause, because I want to be extremely clear on the record. Everything on this platform is alleged. We are not standing here today to hand down a verdict. We are not standing here today to make a defamatory claim. Chrisean Rock has not been charged with anything related to Ronnie's death. Nobody has. The case remains open. The investigation remains active. Prosecutors in Maryland are still building whatever it is they are building, and until they place a name on a warrant, that name has not been placed. But talk on the ground is, and reporting on multiple platforms confirms, that Chrisean Rock has come up more than once in the conversation surrounding Ronnie's death. And when the ashes keep showing up in the same yard, sweetheart, something is burning nearby. That is not defamation. That is common sense. Chrisean, honey, let me widen the lens for a second, because to understand why this story is not going away, you have to understand who Ronnie was and who he was becoming. Ronnie was not a random man. Ronnie was not a bystander. Ronnie was a former partner of Chrisean Rock who had gone on the record, on more than one podcast, saying that he was the biological father of her firstborn. He said he had known Chrisean since before the world had heard her name. He said he had watched her rise from the very early days, before the fame, before the reality show, before the entire Blueface chapter. He said he had text messages, he said he had photos, he said he had a full timeline. And what he wanted, in his own words, was a paternity test. He was not asking for money. He was not asking for a magazine cover. He was asking for one court-ordered swab, one lab result, one number on a piece of paper. That is the request that Ronnie was making right up until the night he was killed. Now, if that request had been granted, and if the number on that piece of paper had come back the way Ronnie kept swearing it would come back, the entire mythology of Chrisean Rock's most public relationship would have shattered on impact. Because Chrisean Rock has spent years building a narrative around the paternity of her son. She has taken that narrative to court, she has taken that narrative to the reality show cameras, she has taken that narrative into every viral moment she has ever had. That narrative is the load-bearing wall of Chrisean Rock's public persona. And Ronnie Doe was walking around with what he swore was the sledgehammer. Now Ronnie is dead. And the sledgehammer is missing. And the wall is still standing. And that, sweetheart, is why the ashes will not settle. That is why prosecutors are still digging. That is why podcasters are still pressing. That is why Jess West decided that silence was a luxury she could no longer afford. Fire back with force, that is what Chrisean Rock's camp has been trying to do online, but the fire keeps missing its target, because the target is not one video. The target is a growing case file. Chrisean Rock has posted. Chrisean Rock has cried on live. Chrisean Rock has invoked church. Chrisean Rock has invoked prayer. Chrisean Rock has invoked God on more than one broadcast, and I want to be respectful about that because faith is faith. But faith does not close a homicide case. Faith does not answer a subpoena. Faith does not explain why a young man was told, according to his own manager, that he needed to leave his home state in a hurry because a specific household was allegedly pressing on his life. Those are not questions that a live stream can bury. Those are questions that a courtroom will eventually have to answer. Anyway, keep up with me, because there is more, and this is where the story starts to get uncomfortable. Chrisean Rock, for those of you who have not followed her closely, once tried her hand at music. She had a stretch, a real stretch, where she was putting out records, appearing on tracks, calling herself an artist, and even leaning into what she described as a kind of rap rock lane. And Ronnie, from his own accounts on his own interviews, said that a lot of that sound, a lot of those instincts, a lot of that early creative direction, was actually his. He said that Chrisean Rock came up in the same rooms he came up in. He said he was making rap music before she was, and that the moment she started chasing the same lane, she borrowed heavily from what he had already been building. That is Ronnie's version. And Ronnie is not here to defend Ronnie's version anymore. Which is exactly why Jess West is defending it for him. Chrisean Rock, sweetheart, let me be honest. This is not a good look. This is not a look that publicists can spin. This is not a look that a well-timed church post can wash out. When the mother of a man's alleged child is publicly named as one of the last people to threaten him before he was killed, that is not tea. That is testimony. And when that testimony comes from the person who managed his career, the person who bought him the plane tickets, the person who took the doxing hits alongside him, the person who watched him look over his shoulder in his own hometown, that testimony does not come cheap. Jess West is not a random hater. Jess West is a witness. And witnesses, in cases like this, are the reason cold cases stop being cold. Now, meanwhile, I want to talk about the fanbase. And I say this with love, but I say it firm. Chrisean Rock's most devoted fans have been running interference on this story since the day Ronnie died. They have been dogpiling every account that reports on it. They have been mass flagging every video that questions it. They have been coordinating in group chats to bury any conversation that lands within 100 feet of the word paternity. And I understand loyalty. I understand fandom. I understand the emotional investment. But there is a line. When a man is dead and his mother is grieving and his former manager is sitting on camera describing a documented threat pattern that specifically named your favorite celebrity, the appropriate response is not to attack the messenger. The appropriate response is to demand answers. Demand a paternity test. Demand a police statement. Demand a public timeline. Because if Chrisean Rock is innocent, and she may very well be, then the fastest way to clear Chrisean Rock's name is to let the investigation finish. Not to bury it. Not to bully it. Not to blame Jess West for having the receipts. Let the truth walk. If Chrisean Rock is clean, the truth will walk her right out of this. And if she is not, well, no fanbase in history has ever managed to outyell a coroner's report. Struck under the ribcage, that is what this interview did to the internet this week. Because Jess West did not stop at the plane tickets. Jess West did not stop at the death threats. Jess West went further. She described a young man who was rising too fast for his own safety. She described a young man whose team was actively coordinating around the possibility that he would not survive the year. She described conversations, phone calls, text messages, and moments of raw fear that no manager forgets. And she made it clear that Ronnie was not paranoid. Ronnie was not making it up. Ronnie was not exaggerating for content. Ronnie was reading the room, and the room was telling him, in every direction, that speaking about his alleged son was going to cost him his life. And it did. Chrisean Rock, this is the part of the story where the audience decides. The audience has been patient. The audience has given you the benefit of the doubt. The audience has watched you rebuild, has watched you cry, has watched you pray, has watched you post. But the audience is also watching Jess West. The audience is also watching Tasha K. The audience is also watching All About the Tea. The audience is also watching the Maryland prosecutors. And the audience is now beginning to do the math out loud. When Ronnie's face was on every timeline, when Ronnie was in every headline, when Ronnie was one paternity test away from rewriting the biggest chapter of your public life, Ronnie was killed. And the person Ronnie kept telling his manager to be afraid of, was you. That is not my accusation. That is the sequence of events, laid out by the man's own team, on the man's own record. Anyway, honey, let me widen the frame even further, because this story is not just about one woman and one man. This story is about a pattern that has been showing up in celebrity culture for years. A pattern where a rising star tries to correct the record on their own paternity, on their own timeline, on their own biography, and suddenly that rising star meets an unfortunate end. It happened to Ronnie Doe. It has been whispered in other cases before Ronnie. And every time it happens, the public asks the same question. Who benefits? Who benefits from the silence? Who benefits from the file staying closed? Who benefits from the mother of the child never having to answer the paternity question in a courtroom? Sweetheart, when you follow that question all the way to the end of the hallway, you find yourself standing in front of a door that has Chrisean Rock's name written on it in permanent marker. Not because the internet put it there. Because the timeline put it there. Because Jess West put it there. Because Ronnie, before he died, put it there himself. And let me be extra careful here. Chrisean Rock has not been charged. Chrisean Rock has not been convicted. Chrisean Rock has not been named on a warrant. Chrisean Rock is presumed innocent, and I will say that as many times as I have to say it to keep this segment on the record. But being presumed innocent by a court of law is not the same thing as being presumed innocent by a public that can read. And the public can read the calendar. The public can read the death threats. The public can read the flight receipts. The public can read Jess West's face. And when the public reads all of that at once, the public arrives at a suspicion that Chrisean Rock is going to have to live with, whether she likes it or not. Chrisean Rock, honey, this next piece is going to sting, but it is fair. Prosecutors in Maryland are not idiots. Prosecutors in Maryland do not open cold homicide files because a podcaster whispered a name. Prosecutors in Maryland open files because leads keep coming back to the same doorstep. And leads have been coming back to your doorstep for months now, Chrisean Rock. The complex reporting on Ronnie's case has been ongoing. The TMZ reporting on Ronnie's case has been ongoing. The Instagram cycle around Ronnie's case has been ongoing. And now the All About the Tea interview with Jess West has poured a fresh gallon of accelerant on the whole file. Whether that accelerant burns your name or clears your name, that is not up to me. That is up to the state's attorney's office in Baltimore. And they are, according to the reporting, still working the case. Meanwhile, and I say this to the fans, because I know some of you are going to be in these comments swinging, let me remind you of something. It is possible to love Chrisean Rock and still want the truth about Ronnie Doe. Those two positions are not mutually exclusive. You can be a fan and still be a citizen. You can stand and still want the paperwork. Because at the end of the day, a young man is dead. He was somebody's son. He was somebody's brother. He was somebody's friend. And whoever pulled that trigger in Maryland in February of 2025 is still walking around free. Free to eat. Free to sleep. Free to laugh at us on the timeline. That is unacceptable. That is not entertainment. That is a real family in real grief, and they deserve real answers. Fire back with force, but fire back with facts. That is my ask of the fandom. If Chrisean Rock is innocent, prove it with a paternity test. Prove it with a police statement. Prove it with a cleared alibi. Prove it with anything other than a live stream tantrum. Because live stream tantrums do not close homicide investigations. Live stream tantrums do not unsilence Ronnie. Live stream tantrums do not undo Jess West's testimony. What closes a case is evidence. What clears a name is evidence. And Chrisean Rock, if you truly did not have a hand in what happened to Ronnie, the fastest, cleanest, most permanent way to clear your name is to walk into a Maryland precinct and hand them a full timeline of your February. Not on Instagram. On paper. Chrisean, sweetheart, I know that is a hard sentence to hear. I know your camp will not want you to hear it. I know your fans will fight me in these comments over it. But it is the truth, and I am not in the business of soft truths tonight. Because there is a woman named Jess West who took a personal risk to sit in front of a camera and say what she said. There is a family in Maryland that is still grieving. There is a prosecutor's office still turning over paperwork. And there is a young man named Ronnie whose voice has been permanently removed from the argument he was trying to win. That silence is loud. That silence is louder than any music you have ever put out, Chrisean Rock. And that silence is going to keep getting louder every single week until somebody, somewhere, finally hands the family the answers they have been asking for since February. Anyway, moving right along, because this is where the story is heading, and I want you to be ahead of the news cycle when it lands. Word is traveling fast that Jess West is not the only person in Ronnie's former circle preparing to speak. People close to the room are whispering that at least 2 other associates of Ronnie's have footage, texts, and voice notes that they have been sitting on out of fear. People close to the room are whispering that the Maryland investigators have already reached back out to several of these associates in recent weeks. People close to the room are whispering that a much bigger story is about to break, and when it breaks, it is not going to break in Chrisean Rock's favor. Now, I cannot verify all of that on this broadcast tonight. Nobody can, until the receipts hit the timeline. But I will say this. The pace at which this story is moving right now is not the pace of a rumor. This is the pace of a case. And cases, when they start moving at this pace, tend to produce arrests. Chrisean Rock, honey, let me offer you a moment of grace, because I do not run this segment without at least trying to be fair. If you are innocent, this is your window. This is your window to sit down with a real journalist, on a real record, with a real lawyer, and say what you know. This is your window to release your February. This is your window to release your communications with Ronnie in the weeks before he died. This is your window to release your alibi. This is your window to hand over the paternity request Ronnie was making, and let a lab settle it once and for all. If you are innocent, sweetheart, that window is wide open right now, and every day you leave it open without walking through it, another Jess West is going to come forward, and the case is going to grow, and the pressure is going to grow, and the fanbase is going to have a harder and harder time holding the line. And if you are not innocent, well, that is a different conversation, and that conversation is one that we will let the Maryland prosecutors have with you at the appropriate hour. Meanwhile, the Chrisean Rock fanbase is going to do what fanbases do. They are going to swarm this video. They are going to swarm this channel. They are going to swarm every comment section that dares to say Chrisean Rock's name in the same sentence as Ronnie Doe. And I want to say this to them directly. I hear you. I see you. I understand your love for her. But there is a line where fandom becomes obstruction, and there is a line where loyalty becomes cover-up. And that line is being crossed in these comment sections every single day. If you want to defend Chrisean Rock, defend her with facts. Do not defend her by burying Jess West. Do not defend her by attacking the family of a dead man. Do not defend her by doxing every content creator who reports on the case. That is not defense. That is complicity. And in a case like this, complicity leaves fingerprints too. Chrisean Rock, sweetheart, I want to circle back to something Jess West said, because I do not think enough people are sitting with it. Jess said that when Ronnie was at his biggest, when Ronnie was catching the most heat, when Ronnie was flying out of Maryland just to sleep at night, Ronnie never once named anybody else. Not a business rival. Not a former friend. Not a street beef. Not a random hater. Only one household. Yours, Chrisean Rock. That is a specific, narrow, unambiguous accusation from a man who is no longer here to walk it back. And in every homicide investigation ever conducted, when the victim, in the days before the killing, tells multiple people they are afraid of one specific household, investigators do exactly what the Maryland investigators are reportedly doing. They knock on that household's door. They ask that household questions. They subpoena that household's phone records. They pull that household's location data. That is not conspiracy. That is procedure. And procedure, Chrisean Rock, is coming for its answers. Now let me hit you with the piece that ties this whole night together, because this is the piece that I want lodged in the front of your brain when you go to sleep tonight. Ronnie Doe was not just a former boyfriend of Chrisean Rock. Ronnie Doe was a former boyfriend of Chrisean Rock who was actively trying to overturn the paternity of her most public child in a court of public opinion. Ronnie Doe was gaining traction. Ronnie Doe was gaining a platform. Ronnie Doe was gaining credibility. And in the middle of that gain, Ronnie Doe was silenced. Permanently. And the person he told his own manager to be afraid of, the person he told to fly him out of state, the person he named in his own private texts as the source of the fear, was Chrisean Rock. Now put that on a whiteboard. Put those 5 facts on a whiteboard. Draw a line between them. Draw the arrow. And ask yourself, out loud, whether that whiteboard looks like a coincidence, or whether it looks like a motive. I am not telling you what the answer is. But I am telling you what the whiteboard says. And meanwhile, in the middle of all of this, Chrisean Rock has been posting like it is a regular Tuesday. Chrisean Rock has been going live. Chrisean Rock has been dropping content. Chrisean Rock has been booking the same cloud economy she has been booking for years. And the internet is starting to notice the disconnect. Because when a former partner is murdered, and the whispers are pointing at your household, the tone-deaf move is to keep dancing on the timeline like nothing is happening. The self-aware move is to sit down, take the L, respect the moment, and cooperate with the investigation. Chrisean Rock, sweetheart, you have been given multiple chances to pick the self-aware move, and every single time, you have picked the timeline instead. That is a choice. And the internet is filing that choice under the growing folder that has your name on it. Anyway, keep up with me, because I need you to understand something else. This story does not end with Jess West. This story is going to keep escalating. Every week, another creator is going to pick up the thread. Every week, another podcaster is going to interview another person from Ronnie's circle. Every week, another screenshot is going to leak. Every week, the Maryland investigators are going to receive one more tip. And with every one of those weeks, Chrisean Rock's public silence is going to get a little more damning. Because at some point, no matter how loud the fandom is, the volume of receipts is going to outpace the volume of denial. And when that tipping point hits, and it will hit, Chrisean Rock is going to have to answer questions she has spent a year and a half ducking. Chrisean Rock, honey, one more time for the record, everything on this platform is alleged. Nothing on this platform is a verdict. But allegations, when they stack up in a straight line and point at the same door, are not a coincidence. They are a case being built in public. And the case being built in public around Chrisean Rock right now is one of the most alarming, most detailed, most consistent cases I have covered on this channel in a long time. There is smoke coming from every window. There are ashes on every windowsill. And when I look at the address on the mailbox out front, I see the same name every single time. Let me leave you with this, sweetheart, because I want you to walk away from this segment with a decision to make. The decision is not whether Chrisean Rock is guilty. That decision belongs to a jury that has not been seated yet. The decision is whether you, as a viewer, as a citizen, as a fan, are going to let this story fade into the algorithm, or whether you are going to keep pressing on it until the family of Ronnie Doe gets the answers they deserve. Because if we let this story fade, if we let the case go cold, if we let the fanbase bury it, then Ronnie's silence becomes permanent, and Chrisean Rock's next chapter gets written like nothing ever happened. And I am not okay with that. And I do not think you are okay with that either. So here is my ask. Do not swipe past this. Do not let the timeline eat this. Do not let the next celebrity scandal wash this off your feed. Keep Ronnie Doe's name in the conversation. Keep Jess West's testimony in the conversation. Keep Chrisean Rock's timeline in the conversation. And keep pressing the Maryland prosecutors, publicly, respectfully, but relentlessly, until this case gets the closure a young man's family deserves. Because if we do not press, nobody presses. And if nobody presses, Chrisean Rock walks. And if Chrisean Rock walks without answering, then every single receipt Jess West laid on the table this week was laid down for nothing. And I refuse to let it be for nothing. Now, before I let you go tonight, I want to hit you with the question that everybody in the comments is going to be arguing about within the hour. Here it is. Do you want Chrisean Rock to sit down, cooperate fully with the Maryland investigators, take the paternity test, hand over her February timeline, and clear her name once and for all, so we can move on from this story with actual closure? Or do you want Chrisean Rock to keep doing what she has been doing, keep posting through it, keep praying through it, keep ignoring it, and let the case build against her one Jess West at a time until the whole thing collapses on live television? Drop your answer in the comments. Drop your prediction. Drop your theory. Because I am reading every single one, and I am picking my favorites for the follow-up segment that is dropping later this week. And trust and know, that follow-up segment is going to have names on it. Names you are not expecting. Because there is one more voice, one more former associate of Ronnie's, who has reportedly agreed to sit down with a major platform in the coming days. I cannot name that voice yet. I will not name that voice yet. But when that voice speaks, it is going to reframe this entire case. And when it does, I want you right here with me, on this channel, so we can unpack it together in real time. Hit the subscribe button. Turn on the notifications. Because this story is not slowing down. It is speeding up. And Chrisean Rock, sweetheart, whether you like it or not, the whole world is watching your next move. Talk on the ground is, that next move is coming sooner than you think. I am done for tonight. Stay safe out here. Stay skeptical out here. And keep your ear to the pavement, because when the next receipt drops, you know exactly where to find me. Until then, sweetheart, keep the pressure on. Keep the questions loud. Keep Ronnie Doe's name in your mouth. And do not let a single one of them forget that a young man is dead, and the truth, the whole truth, is still sitting in a file somewhere in Maryland, waiting for the world to be brave enough to open it. Now before I wrap this whole thing in a bow, I want to circle back one more time to the piece that keeps nagging at me, because as a person who has covered this culture for a long stretch of years, I have learned to trust the pieces that keep nagging. The piece that keeps nagging at me is the specificity of the fear. Jess West did not describe Ronnie as generally paranoid. Jess West did not describe Ronnie as afraid of the industry. Jess West did not describe Ronnie as spooked by the streets in the abstract. Jess West described Ronnie as afraid of one specific household, named that household out loud on camera, and then walked us through, step by step, the operational lengths that Ronnie's team went to in order to keep him alive. The plane tickets. The out-of-state safe housing. The phone number rotations. The refusal to post his location. That is not the behavior of a paranoid influencer. That is the behavior of a witness in a case that had not yet been filed. And now, sweetheart, that case is being filed in the court of public opinion in real time, and Chrisean Rock is the name that keeps rising to the top of every affidavit. Chrisean, honey, I want to say one last thing on the record, and I want you to hear it clearly, because I know somebody in your camp is going to send you a clip of this segment. If any of what Jess West has said on camera is inaccurate, sue her. Sue Jess West. Sue all about the tea. Sue every platform that has amplified this interview. Because if Jess West is lying, the fastest way to prove she is lying is a defamation suit in a real courtroom with real discovery and real depositions. But we both know why that lawsuit will not be filed. Because in a defamation suit, Chrisean Rock, your text messages come out. Your call logs come out. Your February comes out. Your relationship with Ronnie comes out. Your relationship with the specific family members Ronnie feared comes out. And your camp knows, sweetheart, that a defamation lawsuit is a two-way street, and the traffic on that street would not be moving in your favor. So no lawsuit is going to be filed. No cease and desist is going to hold. No PR statement is going to stick. And the story is going to keep growing, one Jess West at a time, one screenshot at a time, one leaked voice note at a time, until either Chrisean Rock is cleared by evidence or Chrisean Rock is charged by a prosecutor. There is no third door. So here we are. A young man is dead. A former manager has spoken. Prosecutors are still working. Podcasters are still pressing. Platforms are still reporting. And Chrisean Rock is still posting. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, in a Maryland file cabinet, there is a folder with Ronnie Doe's name on it, and inside that folder, somewhere between the crime scene photos and the witness statements, is the answer to the question that this entire culture has been circling for a year and a half. Who did this? Why? And who else knew? And when that folder finally opens, when that answer finally lands, when that press conference finally happens, I will be right here, on this channel, breaking it down for you in real time. Because that is what we do here. We do not chase the algorithm. We chase the truth. And the truth, on this story, is finally getting close enough to touch. Chrisean Rock, one final word before I sign off tonight, and I mean this with the full weight of every sentence I have said on this segment. If you are innocent, I will be one of the first voices apologizing to you on this platform when your name is cleared. That is a promise. I will not run from that apology. I will not delete this video. I will make a follow-up segment, I will pin your statement to the top of my community tab, and I will personally lead the charge on rehabilitating your name in the culture. Because that is what integrity looks like on this side of the mic. But if you are not innocent, Chrisean Rock, and the evidence eventually says what Jess West's testimony is starting to say, then you owe Ronnie Doe's family a truth that no amount of live streams, no amount of church posts, no amount of viral moments, will ever repay. And when that day comes, I will be here for that too. So here is the last question of the night, and I want you to answer it in the comments, because your answer is going to shape the next segment. If you had to bet money right now, real money, on whether the Maryland investigators are going to close this case with an arrest inside the next 12 months, what is your bet? Yes, an arrest is coming, and Chrisean Rock's name is going to be inside the paperwork. Or no, this case is going to stay cold forever, the way too many of these cases stay cold, and Ronnie Doe's family is going to be left carrying a grief with no closure. Drop your bet in the comments. Drop your reasoning. Drop your prediction. Because when this case finally moves, and it will move, I want to be able to pin the people who called it right. That is the game we play on this channel. Truth, receipts, and the courage to say the name out loud when nobody else will. Chrisean Rock. Ronnie Doe. Jess West. Maryland. The story is not over. The story is just getting started. And you, sweetheart, are exactly where you need to be to watch it break. Talk on the ground is, this next chapter drops sooner than any of us are ready for. I will be here when it does. Question is, will you?